So let's crush asthma, shall we? If you happen to be an individual who falls into the category of trying to use their rescue inhaler less and less and less and less by building up, strengthening, supporting, enhancing, encouraging your body in some way, shape, or form, or your lungs in some way, shape, or form, this is definitely an interesting video for you. Now, in order to break apart asthma, we got to focus on one major area of concern, and that happens to be our immune system, or an overreactivity of our immune system. We've got to bring it in line and control it a little bit better. And how do we do that? Well, in order to do that specifically for asthma, we got to focus on two other areas of concern. One being LPS, or our absorption and production of this compound called a lipopolysaccharide. We'll talk about that in a second. And on the other hand, we also have to increase our production of these proteins. They're called heat shock proteins and cold shock proteins. We'll get to that in a second. So these are our rabbit holes, my friends. So let's delve in. Now, starting with the LPS, or those lipopolysaccharides. To make it simple and short, basically bad unhealthy bacteria in our gut produce this compound. It's called a lipopolysaccharide. And it just so happens to be the nature of this little guy, this LPS, lipopolysaccharide, to irritate our trachea and our bronchoalveolar tissues, basically our lungs. So this LPS causes internal inflammation in your lungs, and it acts as a primer for an asthma attack. Now, it also does something else. It increases the production of immune cells in our body, such as eosinophils, phagocytes, neutrophils, and lymphocytes. Now, we would think, oh, hey, if I have more immune cells, that's a good thing. Well, in this case, it's not. And remember, our immune cells have to mature. They have to go through a process of education. If not, they become hyperactive and they react to all kinds of little things. So the story plays out like this. You are absorbing a lot of that lipopolysaccharide from your gut, and it's causing an internal inflammation in your lungs naturally. And at the same time, it's the nature of your immune system to migrate towards any area of inflammation, to inspect it, make sure everything's cool, make sure that there's no invading pathogens, viruses, bacteria. That's their job. That's a good thing. But in this case, the LPS, those lipopolysaccharides, are enhancing and increasing the total quantity of immune cells that are amassing in your lungs. And they're like, what's going on? We need to fix something. There's all kinds of inflammation here. What's going down in Chinatown? And then what you know it, there's a little pollen over there, or just stuck to the little lung, the cells of your lung, or somebody's smoking over there, or I don't know. There's some perfume. There's a chemical scent hormone thing, and that, my friend, causes an initial alarm to be raised by your immune cells, and then you start increasing the amount of histamine that you make. You get this, it's called a peritoneal mast cell degranulation. Sorry if that's a big word or a big phrase. Basically, that means you are going to have an asthma attack. Now, this is not cool. We have to fix this whole area. And how do we do that? Well, in the short term, what we need to do is combat that LPS, those lipopolysaccharides. And in order to do that, I found it very helpful to use two natural herbal supplements. One is called Cordyceps, or an extract of Cordyceps. It's a mushroom. And the other one is an oil from black cumin, or black cumin seed oil. What are they good for? Well, you know how I said those lipopolysaccharides cause inflammation in our lungs, and then it causes our immune cells to come and they inspect, and anyway, they can ultimately lead to an asthma attack. And in order to do that, they release certain chemicals, namely like interleukin 5, interleukin 4, those intracellular adhesion molecule 1, or the ICAM1, or these matrix metalloproteinase 9. Anyway, those words translated means asthma. Now, it just so happens to be that Cordyceps mushroom innately lowers all of that in our body. So it has a net effect of reducing the hyperactivity of our lungs because it has a particular affinity to control that part of our immune system that can create that chemical cocktail that would give us an asthmatic attack. Now, furthermore, and I'm going to talk about this or mention this a little bit later on, another interesting thing that cordyceps can do is, well, two things really. It has to do with our gut. A cordyceps mushroom will increase this immunoglobulin called IgA. And what's good about that is it lives in the mucosal tissues of our body, and it will absorb, block, attach onto any type of pathogen that would otherwise heighten the alert of our immune system. And so it's another way that it can calm our immune system in that it prevents some pathogen or foreign particle from aggravating some tissue, causing inflammation. So it's like a wall. It blocks that from happening. So we end up with a more calmed immune system. Furthermore, this cordyceps mushroom happens to increase the lactobacillus genus, or those lactobacillus healthy, good bacteria in our gut. And these guys can create an acidic environment that makes it more difficult for the bad bacteria in our gut to grow and thrive. And remember, those bad bacteria are the guys that like to create those lipopolysaccharides that are the initial priming factor for anybody to have an asthmatic attack. Now, let's jump over to black cumin really quick. Black cumin is really awesome. It does so many things, but I want to focus on really just two aspects. So black cumin has this interesting compound in it. It's called thymoquinone. And this happens to reduce the inflammation of our trachea, our larynx, our pharynx, our bronchioles, and it's actually a smooth muscle relaxer. So when we're undergoing a possible asthmatic attack and we feel that tightness in our chest, we feel constricted in our diaphragm, those are all smooth muscles and they're tightening up, they're cramping up. Well, that thymoquinone helps to relax it. So just real quick, just to summarize, cordyceps mushrooms helps to deal with the chemical cocktail your immune system can create to instigate an asthmatic attack. And then black cumin, once you're undergoing that chemical cocktail, that asthmatic attack, and you're tightening up inside, that thymoquinone content of black cumin oil helps to relax your smooth muscles, allowing you to breathe and expand your chest and feel like, okay, I can actually physically breathe right now. Going one step further, there's this cascade of events. It comes from a mast cell, and it has to do with the release of histamine. And histamine is an immune system stimulator. And so on top of those lipopolysaccharides that are stimulating your immune system, when a mast cell decides to degranulate, it releases a large amount of histamine. So if you know anybody with any type of allergy symptom whatsoever, histamine is a major culprit of that. Now, I'm talking about that because that pollen that is that final trigger, that pollen is a guy that would release or would cause a cascade of events, that the end product being a release of an absurd quantity of histamine. Now, if we could stabilize those mast cells in some way, shape, or form, that would be a good thing, because essentially it's increasing their tolerance. So instead of like one little pollen molecule increasing histamine, it might take like 1 million of them, for example. Maybe not. But anyway, so black cumin also can stabilize, increase the tolerance of those mast cells. So whatever is in your environment that would be that final trigger for an asthmatic attack, black cumin likes to increase your tolerance of that. So just to summarize real quick, the cordyceps mushrooms helps to lower that overall chemical cocktail that can be created to instigate an asthmatic attack. It creates that IgA, the immunoglobulin in your mucosal tissues, to help block maybe that pollen, help block maybe that some pathogenic substance that would lead to an asthmatic attack. But it also increases healthy bacteria in your gut that would fight off and kill the bad bacteria in your gut that would create that initial priming factor, that lipopolysaccharide, the bad guy. And then we have the black cumin that has that thymoquinone content. It helps to relax the smooth muscles of your chest cavity and allows you to breathe. And it also helps to stabilize those mast cells so they don't release so much histamine from a single trigger point. Man, that's awesome, but there's more. Now, like asthma, we have to think of it and help strengthen our body over the long term. And there's some things that our body can produce innately that are healthy. I mentioned them at the beginning of this video. They're called heat shock and cold shock proteins, and they play a fundamental role in managing and monitoring our immune system. And here's how. Okay, so basically, going out in the sun would stimulate your body to produce heat shock proteins. These are very special proteins that are they're called chaperones. They look after certain chemical processes in your body, and they make sure everything is lining up as it should. They literally monitor the quality of your body. That's pretty cool. The quality of your proteins are monitored by these things. They do many things in your body, but I just want to focus on an immune system modulating component here. So just to summarize, we can stimulate these heat shock proteins with UV light, with infrared light, with far infrared light, or just going out in the sun, and you will start generating these heat shock proteins. Now, if you happen to live in a climate where there's no sun for months out of the year, you can also stimulate these heat shock proteins with cold water or just being out in the cold. Your body, well, actually, we back up real quick. There's actually this interesting health technique. It's called balneology, and it's where, like say for example, in Russia, they have these bathhouses where you go in the sauna heat, and you can activate some heat shock proteins in the sauna, and then right after the sauna, you go dip in this ice cold, freezing water, and then you create those cold shock proteins. So you're just creating this nice, wonderful, heavenly mix of these wonderful chaperone proteins that monitor the quality of your body. Anyway, so it doesn't matter if you can go out in the sun or you can take a cold shower every morning. You're ultimately, by doing these techniques, getting in being in hot environment, or going out in the sun, or being in some frozen lake, or just if you only have a cold shower, if that's what you got, then that's what you got. But the idea is to create these cold and heat shock proteins. And the reason why we want to create them is because they can modulate our immune system. Now, when we have an immune system awakening, when we have an active immune system, we have to have something in our body that controls it. Otherwise, our immune system will kill us from the inside out. And we have that part in our body. We have special immune cells for that. They're called like CD4 or CD25 lymphocytes. And basically, when we activate our heat shock and cold shock proteins, they take these lymphocytes, the CD4, the CD25, just for an example, and they activate something in them. They activate this fork head transcription factor. And what that means for you and me is that these lymphocytes suddenly turn into a class of immune cell that we call Tregs. These class of immune cells that all of a sudden mature, and they look instantly at what our immune system is doing internally. And they say, whoa, look, dude, I know you're trying to help me over there, but you are causing such severe damage in me. You're swelling me and I can't breathe. You need to calm down. So what happens is these regulatory T cells start calming down all kinds of immune processes. And what that does for you and me, our allergies start to improve. If we have an autoimmune condition, that starts to improve. If we have no energy whatsoever, our energy levels start to go up because our immune system takes so much energy from us. It's pretty devastating. So just to summarize really, really quick, in order to crush asthma, we need to monitor how much LPS or those lipopolysaccharides that we create, because they are an initial priming factor to irritate the lining in our lungs, so much so that even a few particles of pollen, for example, or smoke or fragrance, or even the temperature outside is enough to instigate an asthmatic attack. Or exercising, for example, is enough to instigate an asthmatic attack. And we start controlling our immune system with a cordyceps mushroom, with black cumin oil, and with our production of these heat shock and cold shock proteins. This, my friends, is an awesome way to start healing your asthma immediately. Now, I do want to mention, this is like a 30-day protocol. Your asthma most likely isn't going to go away overnight, but as you start creating those heat shock proteins, and as you start creating a different internal chemistry with the cordyceps and the black cumin, you will find for certain you are using your rescue inhaler less and less and less and less, because you can just breathe under different environments. Now, I do want to mention in closing two things, or three things actually. There's two other probiotics you want to be on in order to reduce and block the production of lipopolysaccharides. So the Bifidobacterium, this genus of probiotics, Bifidobacterium, block the absorption or production of those lipopolysaccharides by bad bacteria. The other strain of or genus of bacteria you want to look at are Bacillus. These are like soil-based probiotics. The Bacillus are really, really good at tightening the gut junctions and making it more difficult for us to absorb those lipopolysaccharides. Remember, this is a major area of concern. Those lipopolysaccharides are a major influencer for our immune system, making it more hyperreactive and making our lung tissue hyperreactive as well. If we can control those lipopolysaccharides, your asthma will definitely improve. And we use those two probiotic strains to do that. Now, I want to mention something else, just really, really quick. Sometimes the physical air temperature, or like when you want to create those heat shock proteins, sometimes if you go in a sauna, you are so sensitive in that moment that it could cause an asthmatic attack, so you naturally avoid it. Or by going into really, really cold water, it activates an asthmatic attack, or breathing in cold air, for example, can activate it. There's some things that we can do, two other herbs, I'm not going to really break them down much, I'm just going to mention them in passing, that will increase your tolerance right away. One of them is Rhodiola, and the other one is called Shilajit, or a purified Shilajit resin. They are actually used all the time to help climatize your body to any given climate. And the temperature is essentially a factor that creates these heat shock and cold shock proteins. So if you can't deal with the temperature because you feel like you're going to have an asthmatic attack, you definitely want to check out Shilajit resin and or Rhodiola. Anyway, I wish you all the success, and cheers.